Okay, so we're diving into software project budgeting today.
Wow.
And you've given us a great set of articles from LearnXYZ.
Yeah,
Looks like you're really into this topic.
it's a good one.
We've got pieces covering like everything from the basic components of a budget
Mhm.
to like detailed examples of essential documents,
Right.
like risk management plans and even how to course correct when things go off track.
Yep. Okay.
So-
No, this is gonna be good.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll not only grasp the essentials of software project budgeting,
Okay.
but also like have some practical tools and real-world examples
Cool.
to really make it all click.
I like it.
Now, the article all about a software project budget really breaks down the core components of a budget.
Yeah.
It's like building a house, you need a blueprint.
Right.
And in this case, that blueprint is your budget.
Makes sense.
It outlines all the essential elements you need to consider, from resource costs to software and tools to the underlying infrastructure.
It's all in there.
But I'm curious, when you're approaching a new software project, what's your first step in terms of budgeting? Do you just like start with a blank spreadsheet and just start listing out every possible expense?
Well, it might seem tempting to just dive in and start crunching numbers, but before you even open that spreadsheet, it's crucial to have a clear understanding of the project scope and objectives.
Right.
What are you actually building? Who is it for? What are the must-have features versus the nice-to-haves? Without that clarity, you're essentially budgeting in the dark.
Right.
And that's a recipe for disaster.
It's like trying to navigate a maze without a map.
Exactly.
You might eventually find your way out,
Yeah,
but it'll be a lot more frustrating and time-consuming
sure.
than if you had a clear path to follow.
And once you have that solid understanding of the project scope,
Okay.
then you can start thinking about the specific budget components.
Okay.
And All About a Software Project Budget does a great job of outlining those core elements.
Yep.
Resource costs, software, and tools infrastructure.
Uh-huh.
It even uses that CRM system development example
Right.
to illustrate how those elements play out in a real-world scenario.
I'm particularly intrigued by the CRM example, especially the breakdown of resource costs.
Yeah.
It really highlights the importance of considering not just salaries,
Right.
but also benefits, equipment, and even things like training and professional development.
For sure.
Those costs can add up quickly if you don't factor them in from the start.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the direct costs associated with each role.
Okay.
You also need to consider indirect costs, like overhead expenses, which can sometimes be overlooked.
Like what?
Things like office space, utilities, administrative support, those all contribute to the overall project budget.
And what about the software and tools component? That seems like an area where costs can really spiral out of control,
Yeah,
especially with all the specialized software and cloud-based services available these days.
you're absolutely right. This is where having a clear understanding of the project requirements is crucial.
Okay.
You need to know exactly what software and tools are essential for the project and which ones are just nice to haves.
Right.
And it's not just about the initial purchase or licensing costs.
Maybe.
You also need to factor in ongoing maintenance support and potential upgrades.
Yeah.
Those recurring costs can really impact the long-term budget.
It's like penny wise, pound foolish.
Exactly.
You might save a few bucks up front by opting for a cheaper software solution,
Right.
but if it ends up costing you more in the long run due to limitations or lack of support, then it's not a real saving.
Exactly. And this brings us to the infrastructure component,
Okay.
which can often be a significant part of the budget,
Ugh.
especially for large-scale software projects.
So are you hosting the software on your own servers? Are you using a cloud-based platform? What about security and data backup?
All critical considerations
Yeah.
that need to be factored into the budget.
I imagine those infrastructure decisions can be particularly challenging, especially with the rapid pace of technological advancements in cloud computing and data storage.
Right.
What are some key factors you consider when making those infrastructure decisions?
Scalability is a big one.
Okay.
Can the infrastructure handle the anticipated growth of the project? What about flexibility? Can you easily adjust the infrastructure as the project requirements evolve? And then, of course, there's security and reliability.
Right.
You need to ensure that the data is secure and that the system is reliable and available to users when they need it.
Okay.
These factors all play into the cost of the infrastructure and need to be carefully considered during the budgeting process.
It's about striking that balance between cost-effectiveness, performance, and security.
For sure.
It's a complex equation,
It is.
but it seems like having a clear understanding of the project's scope and objectives, along with a solid grasp of those core budget components, resource costs, software, and tools infrastructure, is a great foundation for building a realistic and effective budget.
I couldn't agree more, but having that foundation is just the first step.
Okay.
The real magic happens when you start putting those numbers into action.
Okay.
Creating those essential budget documents that serve as your roadmap and guide you through the entire project lifecycle.
Okay, so let's talk about those documents. All About a Software Project Budget highlights several that are crucial for maintaining budget control.
Yeah.
It's not just about throwing numbers around. It's about building a structured budgeting system, right?
Exactly. And one of the most important documents, the cornerstone of your budgeting system, is the budget plan itself.
Yeah.
It's more than just a spreadsheet.
Oh, yeah.
It's a comprehensive document that outlines your entire financial strategy for the project.
The article provides a fantastic table that breaks down the key components of a budget plan.
Yeah, it's great.
It's like a checklist that ensures you're considering all the essential elements, from project objectives and scope to detailed cost estimates and contingency planning.
What's fascinating here is that this table not only helps you create a comprehensive budget plan,
right,
but also serves as a communication tool.
Okay.
By sharing this document with stakeholders, you're ensuring that everyone is on the same page regarding the financial aspects of the project.
That transparency is key. And speaking of transparency, another essential document highlighted in the article is the cost breakdown structure.
Right.
This document gets into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
Breaking down project costs into those smaller, manageable chunks.
The cost breakdown structure is like a hierarchical tree
that
visually represents all the cost elements of the project. It helps you see the big picture while also allowing you to drill down into the specifics of each cost category.
And I love how the article emphasizes the importance of clear communication when it comes to the cost breakdown structure.
Yes, very important.
You can't just present a bunch of numbers without explaining why certain costs are necessary.
Right.
For example, if you have a significant budget allocation for specialized testing tools, you need to be able to articulate to stakeholders why those tools are crucial for ensuring the quality and reliability of the software.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Having a well-documented cost breakdown structure with clear explanations and rationale behind each cost category makes it much easier to communicate effectively with stakeholders and justify those budget allocations.
And then there's the change request form, which seems like a critical document for managing those inevitable changes that pop up during a software project.
Oh, for sure.
We've all been there. The client suddenly wants to add a new feature.
Happens all the time.
Or a technical challenge emerges that requires a change in approach.
Yep.
Without a structured process for managing those changes, things can quickly spiral out of control, both in terms of scope and budget.
The change request form is your secret weapon against scope creep and budget overruns. It forces everyone to think through the impact of any proposed change, not just on the features or functionality, but also on the timeline and the budget.
The table detailing the components of the change request form is particularly insightful.
Yeah.
I'm especially drawn to the impact assessment section.
Yeah.
It seems like a powerful way to ensure that every change is carefully considered and approved before it derails the project.
What's fascinating about the impact assessment is that it forces you to quantify the impact of the change.
Okay.
It's not just about saying, oh, this will add a few weeks to the timeline. Yeah. It's about estimating the actual time and cost implications, which then allows you to make informed decisions about whether the change is truly worthwhile.
It's like having a built-in reality check.
Exactly.
And it seems like that level of rigor and transparency is essential for maintaining budget control and ensuring that the project stays on track. But let's be honest, no matter how meticulous we are with our planning and documentation, sometimes budgets go off track.
It happens.
So I'm eager to dive into those course correction strategies.
Okay.
What are some early warning signs that a project might be heading for a budget overrun?
Yeah.
And what are some proactive steps we can take to mitigate those risks?
That's a great question, and one that I think we'll delve into more deeply after a short break.
Okay.
We'll explore those early warning signs, those course correction techniques, and even how to leverage historical data to improve the accuracy of your estimations.
Good.
So stay tuned, because we're just getting started.
All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back to our deep dive into software project budgeting. Before we move on to those course correction strategies, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, using historical data to improve our estimations.
Yeah.
The article, Calibrate Project Estimates, really dives into this. And I have to admit, this is one of those areas where I'm always looking to improve.
It's a tough one.
It's like the art of prediction. But sometimes it feels more like gazing into a crystal ball.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Estimation is one of the most challenging aspects of software project budgeting, and it's where experience and historical data can really make a difference.
So how do we actually go about using that historical data?
Well, the article highlights the importance of leveraging past project data to inform future estimates.
Okay.
It's like having a treasure trove of insights,
Right.
just waiting to be unearthed. But the key is knowing how to extract those insights and apply them effectively.
So are we talking about like manually sifting through old spreadsheets and project reports? Or are there tools and techniques that can help us analyze that data more efficiently?
Well, manually reviewing every detail of past projects would be incredibly time-consuming.
Yeah.
And probably not the most effective approach.
Right.
Fortunately, there are tools specifically designed to help us analyze historical project data and extract meaningful insights.
Like what?
One tool that comes to mind is specific tool name. It allows you to input data from past projects, like actual time spent on tasks, resources used, and costs incurred. Then the tool uses algorithms to analyze those patterns
Okay.
and generate insights that can be applied to future estimations.
So what kind of insights are we talking about?
For example, you might discover that certain types of tasks consistently take longer than initially estimated,
Interesting.
or that certain team members have a higher rate of accuracy in their estimations.
It's like having a virtual project historian
Yeah.
who can help us learn from our past experiences
Right.
and make more informed predictions about the future.
But it's crucial to use these tools critically and thoughtfully.
Okay.
You need to understand the underlying assumptions and limitations of the algorithms
Right.
and be able to interpret the results in the context of the specific project you're budgeting for.
So it's about using these tools as a guide, not a dictator.
Right.
They can provide valuable insights, but it's still up to us to apply those insights judiciously, taking into account all the unique factors and variables of each project.
Right.
Now, the article also mentions different estimation techniques, analogous parametric bottom-up, and it highlights the pros and cons of each. In your experience, when does each technique really shine?
That's a great question. Each technique has its strengths and weaknesses, and choosing the right one depends on the specific project and the information available.
Okay.
Analogous estimation, for example, is a great approach when you have limited information about the new project,
Okay.
but you have data from similar past projects.
So you're basically using the past project as a benchmark
Exactly.
and then adjusting the estimate based on any differences in scope, complexity, or resources.
Right. It's a quick and relatively simple method,
Okay.
but it relies heavily on the accuracy of the data from the past project.
So it's like using a recipe as a starting point,
I love that analogy.
and then making adjustments based on your own preferences and the ingredients you have on hand.
Now, parametric estimation is a more statistically driven approach.
Okay.
It involves identifying key cost drivers for the project.
Like what?
Things like lines of code, number of features, team size,
Okay.
and then using historical data to develop a mathematical formula that relates those drivers to the overall project cost.
So it's like having a scientific formula for predicting project costs.
Exactly. But developing those formulas requires a significant amount of data and analysis.
Now, bottom-up estimation is the most detailed and granular approach.
Right.
It involves breaking down the project into its smallest tasks and estimating the effort and cost for each task individually.
Yes, and then you roll up those individual task estimates to arrive at the total project estimate.
It's like assembling a puzzle piece by piece
Exactly.
until you have the complete picture.
It's meticulous and thorough, but it requires a lot of patience and attention to detail.
And the choice of which technique to use often comes down to a balance between accuracy time and the information available.
Right.
Sometimes you might even use a combination of techniques,
Yeah.
depending on the specific needs of the project.
It's like having a toolbox full of different estimation tools.
Yeah.
And you choose the right tool for the job at hand.
But I want to shift gears a bit and talk about those moments when, despite our best efforts at estimation and planning, budgets go off track. How to course correct a fixed price project budget and how to course correct a variable price project budget provide some great insights into this. And they start by highlighting the difference between those two types of projects.
Right.
That distinction seems crucial for understanding how to approach course correction.
You're absolutely right. The type of contract you have with the client, fixed price or variable price, significantly impacts your options for course correction.
Okay.
With a fixed price project, you have a set budget that doesn't change, regardless of any unexpected challenges or changes in scope.
So your options for course correction are more limited.
Yeah, you might have to renegotiate the scope cut features or find ways to increase efficiency without increasing costs.
It's like having a fixed amount of clay to work with.
I love that visual.
You can mold it and shape it,
Right?
but you can't add more clay to the mix.
Now, with a variable price project,
Okay.
you have more flexibility to adjust the budget as needed.
So you can add or remove features,
Right.
adjust the timeline,
Uh-huh.
and even increase the budget if necessary, as long as you communicate those changes clearly to the client and they approve them.
Exactly. That open communication and transparency are crucial for managing a variable price project effectively.
Now, both articles offer a series of practical steps for course correction, regardless of whether you're dealing with a fixed price or variable price project.
Yeah.
Things like reassessing the scope, optimizing resource allocation, implementing cost control measures, and of course, improving communication with all stakeholders.
Right.
Okay, so let's dive into those practical steps, starting with reassessing the scope.
Okay.
It seems like this is often the first and most important step when a project is heading for a budget overrun.
You're absolutely right. Reassessing the scope involves taking a hard look at the project requirements
Okay.
and identifying any areas where you can potentially reduce scope without compromising the core value of the project.
It's about having those sometimes difficult conversations with the client,
Right.
explaining the impact of certain features or functionalities on the budget,
Uh-huh.
and working together to prioritize what absolutely needs to be included versus what can potentially be postponed or even eliminated.
It's like pruning a tree.
I like that.
You're removing those non-essential branches to allow the core of the tree to grow stronger and healthier.
And sometimes reassessing the scope might involve renegotiating contracts with vendors or suppliers.
Yeah, if the original contracts were based on a certain scope and timeline, and
Yeah.
those have now changed, it's important to have those conversations early on and explore whether there's any room for adjustment.
Now, what about optimizing resource allocation? How can we ensure that we're using our resources, both people and budget, as effectively as possible?
Optimizing resource allocation is all about making sure the right people are working on the right tasks at the right time.
Oh,
It involves analyzing the skills and experience of your team members
right.
and matching them to tasks where they can be most productive.
So it might involve delegating tasks to team members who are better suited for them,
Mm-hmm.
or providing additional training or support to team members who need to develop their skills in certain areas.
Exactly.
It's like conducting an orchestra.
Yes.
You want to make sure that each musician is playing the instrument they're most skilled at and that the music flows harmoniously.
And it's not just about individual skills and roles, it's also about ensuring that the team is working together effectively.
So do you have clear communication channels?
Right.
Are there regular check-ins and feedback loops?
Uh-huh.
Is there a culture of collaboration and support?
These factors all contribute to efficient resource allocation.
Now, what about cost control measures? What are some practical steps we can take to rein in spending when a project is already going over budget?
Cost control measures can be crucial, especially in those moments of crisis.
Okay.
It involves getting granular with your spending, tracking every expense, and looking for ways to cut costs without sacrificing quality.
So like renegotiating rates with vendors,
Right.
reducing non-essential expenditures like travel or team lunches, or implementing stricter approval processes for expenses.
It's like tightening the belt,
Yeah.
but doing it strategically so that you're not cutting off circulation to vital parts of the project.
And then, of course, there's communication, which is essential throughout the entire course correction process.
Absolutely.
How do you approach the conversations with the client and the team in a way that builds trust
Yeah.
and maintains a collaborative spirit?
That's a great question. It's all about being transparent and honest,
Okay.
but also solution-oriented.
Ah.
When you're communicating a budget overrun to the client, don't try to sugarcoat things or downplay the impact.
Okay.
Explain the situation, clearly outline the potential consequences,
Right.
and then present them with options for moving forward.
So give them choices.
Right.
Empower them to be part of the solution,
Exactly.
rather than just burdening them with the problem.
And then when you're communicating with the team, it's important to acknowledge the challenges, but also to inspire confidence and a sense of shared purpose.
So emphasize that everyone is in this together and that you're committed to finding solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. Those open communication channels and that collaborative spirit are essential not only for navigating those moments of crisis,
Right.
but also for fostering a culture of continuous improvement.
So by learning from our mistakes, refining our processes, and sharing our knowledge, we can collectively get better at budgeting and project management.
It's not just about fixing the immediate problem.
Right.
It's about using those challenges as opportunities for growth and learning.
And speaking of growth and learning, I think it's time we shift our focus to that bigger picture perspective.
Okay.
How software project budgeting fits into the overall organizational context.
Sounds good.
We've talked about the individual project, but how do we ensure that our budgeting practices are aligned with the organization's strategic goals?
Right.
And that we're creating a culture of accountability and continuous improvement.
That's where we'll pick up after a short break.
All right, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about the details of software project budgeting, like cost breakdowns and estimations.
Yeah.
Even those essential course correction strategies. But how does budgeting fit into the bigger picture of the organization?
It's like zooming out from the individual project and looking at the whole landscape.
Okay.
We need to make sure our budgeting practices are aligned with the organization's strategic goals.
Right.
And we're fostering a culture of accountability and continuous improvement. You know, I've seen situations where project teams were so focused on their own budgets that they kind of lost sight of the bigger picture.
It happens all the time.
It was like each team was operating in a silo,
Right.
not really realizing how their projects fit into the overall strategy.
That's a common challenge, and it highlights the importance of clear communication and alignment between project teams and the organizational leadership.
So it starts with those fundamental questions. What are the organization's top priorities? What are the key business objectives?
Right. Those need to be clearly defined, communicated, and regularly revisited.
It's like having a shared compass that keeps everyone heading in the right direction.
But how do we translate those high-level organizational goals into specific, actionable objectives for individual projects?
I've seen those grand strategic plans just end up gathering dust on a shelf.
Yeah.
Because no one knows how to connect them to the day-to-day work.
That's where measurable objectives are so important. It's not enough to just say, we want to improve customer satisfaction.
Right.
You need to define what that actually means.
Give me an example.
Is it a 10% increase in positive customer reviews?
Okay.
Is it a reduction in support tickets?
So those measurable objectives become the yardstick for your project budget.
Exactly.
They help you figure out which features are essential, which risks are worth taking, and how much you can realistically spend to achieve those desired outcomes.
It's like having a scorecard for each project.
Yeah.
You know what you're aiming for, and you can track your progress along the way.
But even with those clear objectives, we still need to consider the human element.
For sure.
Who's responsible for what? Who has the authority to make decisions? Those roles and responsibilities need to be crystal clear, right?
Absolutely. Think about those essential budget documents we discussed earlier.
Okay.
Each one requires input oversight, and sometimes even approval from different people within the organization.
Okay.
You might have the project manager creating the initial budget plan.
Right.
The technical lead providing input on resource needs, and the finance department reviewing and approving the final budget.
So those clear lines of accountability are crucial.
Absolutely.
For making sure the budget is realistic and aligned with organizational policies.
And properly monitored throughout the project life cycle.
It's like having a well-defined chain of command.
Right.
Everyone knows their role and who they report to.
But it's not just about following orders, is it? It's about creating a culture where people feel empowered to own their part in the budgeting process.
Okay.
To learn from mistakes and to continually strive to do better.
We need to move beyond that blame and shame mentality.
For sure.
That can sometimes creep into budgeting discussions.
When a project goes over budget, it's rarely the fault of any single person.
Right.
It's often a complex interplay of factors.
Like what?
Inaccurate estimations, unexpected challenges, changes in scope, maybe even some communication breakdowns along the way.
So instead of pointing fingers, we need to step back, analyze what went wrong, and figure out how to improve the process for next time.
And that requires psychological safety.
Right. People need to feel comfortable admitting mistakes and sharing their ideas without fear of reprisal.
You're absolutely right that psychological safety is paramount.
Okay.
For creating a culture of continuous improvement.
It's about fostering an environment where people feel supported.
Yes.
Encouraged to take risks. And empowered to learn and grow. And that growth mindset can be contagious.
Absolutely.
When people see that it's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them,
Right.
they're more likely to take ownership, be proactive, and contribute their best ideas.
So how do we cultivate that culture of continuous improvement?
Yeah, are we talking about like formal training
Yeah,
programs?
it's a combination of approaches.
Okay.
Formal training programs can be helpful for providing a framework
Uh-huh.
and a shared language around continuous improvement methodologies like lean or agile. But it's also about those informal, everyday interactions.
Make what?
Encouraging feedback, celebrating small wins, recognizing and rewarding those who go above and beyond to improve processes.
It's like those small acts of kindness
Exactly.
that can ripple outward and create a more positive and supportive environment.
And those positive vibes can definitely boost morale and productivity.
But we can't forget about the human cost
Yeah.
of budget overruns or project failures.
Right. We often focus on the financial implications, but there's also an emotional toll
Yeah.
that these situations can take on individuals and teams.
Budget overruns can lead to stress, anxiety, burnout, even damage to team morale.
And when projects fail, those feelings of disappointment, frustration,
Right.
and even a sense of failure can linger long after the project is over.
So it's important to acknowledge those motions provide support
Yes.
and create a space for reflection and learning.
It's about recognizing that we're dealing with human beings,
Right.
not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
And sometimes those human beings need a little extra care and attention when things go wrong.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to the importance of strong leadership.
Okay.
Leaders who can create a culture of trust, transparency, and support
Yeah.
where people feel valued and empowered. Those are the leaders who can navigate those budget challenges and emerge stronger on the other side.
It's that combination of competence and compassion that makes for truly effective leadership.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive into software project budgeting, I think that's a powerful message to leave with.
It's about striking that balance between the art and the science of budgeting,
Right.
between the technical skills and the human touch.
It's about remembering that behind those spreadsheets and budget reports, there are real people with dreams, aspirations, and a desire to create something meaningful.
And when we approach budgeting with that understanding and that human connection, we create not only successful projects, but also a more fulfilling and rewarding work experience for everyone involved.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Likewise.
And I hope our listeners have found this deep dive insightful and inspiring.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration of the world of knowledge and ideas.